My beloved child. A single sentence can quietly change the direction of many hearts, and tonight begins with one of those rare moments. No one expected the room to become so still. Conversations faded without anyone asking them to stop. Faces that had been filled with certainty suddenly searched for meaning instead. Then, in a voice that carried no anger and no desire to impress anyone, the person you love finally spoke the words that no one believed would ever be said aloud. She was never you. Those 4 simple words did not arrive with drama. They arrived with honesty. And somehow, honesty was far more powerful than anyone had prepared for. The second party lowered their eyes, not because someone had defeated them, but because deep inside they realized that affection cannot be borrowed, copied, or forced into existence. Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you, and what happened after those words revealed far more than anyone in that room could understand. There are moments in life when people spend months trying to protect an image, only for a single truthful sentence to quietly dissolve every illusion. That is exactly what unfolded. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was reflective. Every person present began replaying forgotten conversations, overlooked gestures, and quiet decisions that had never made sense until now. Suddenly, they did. The person you love was not comparing anyone. They were finally recognizing something that had lived inside their heart long before they found the courage to speak it. They realized that every attempt to replace what they truly felt only reminded them of what had always been missing. And perhaps, without realizing it, you have experienced something similar in your own life. Sometimes the greatest confirmation does not come when someone says they care. It comes when they finally admit that nothing else ever carried the same meaning. The second party tried to smile with grace, yet their eyes quietly revealed emotions that words could not describe. They understood that kindness cannot create a connection that was never meant to become something deeper. No one judged them. No one celebrated their disappointment. Instead, something unexpected happened. Compassion filled the room. Because everyone understood that hearts do not always follow the plans people carefully design. They move toward what feels genuine, even after long seasons of confusion. Stay till the end, because the next piece of this story is not about regret. It is about a realization that had been growing silently for far longer than anyone imagined. Meanwhile, the person you love stood quietly, almost surprised by their own honesty. It was as though they had been carrying those words for so long that speaking them finally allowed them to breathe freely again. Their thoughts wandered to moments they once dismissed as ordinary brief conversations, shared laughter, peaceful silences that required no explanation. Looking back, they began seeing a pattern they had overlooked. Every meaningful memory somehow pointed in the same direction. Every peaceful feeling carried the same quiet presence. Every hopeful thought returned to the same person. You. But here is the beautiful mystery that no one in that room could fully understand. Those words were never only about the past. They quietly opened the door to something that had not yet happened. A conversation was approaching. A truth was preparing to reveal itself. And someone who had remained silent for much longer than expected was about to say something that would make every person present understand why this unforgettable moment had to happen first. And when those next words are finally spoken, the meaning behind, "She was never you," will become even deeper than anyone could have imagined. A quiet glance passed across the room, and somehow it carried more meaning than 100 conversations ever could. The silence had not ended, it had simply changed. It was no longer the silence of surprise, but the silence of reflection. Everyone seemed to realize that they had just witnessed a moment that could never be taken back. The person you love did not rush to explain what they meant. Instead, they let those words settle naturally, allowing every heart to discover its own understanding. Sometimes the strongest truth is the one that does not demand attention. It simply remains, impossible to ignore. Don't skip, because what happened next revealed that this story had been unfolding long before anyone noticed the signs. Across the room, the second party quietly gathered themselves. Tears were no longer falling because of embarrassment. They were falling because clarity had finally arrived. There is a unique kind of emotion that appears when someone stops holding on to what was never truly theirs to keep. They slowly nodded, almost as if they had answered a question they had been asking themselves for months. In that quiet acceptance, something unexpected happened. The atmosphere softened. There was no blame. No resentment. Only the gentle realization that genuine affection cannot be created through effort alone. It grows where peace already exists. The person you love looked toward the window for a brief moment, as though searching through memories instead of the evening sky. Suddenly, they remembered a simple moment that everyone else would have overlooked. It had not been a grand event. There were no dramatic words or unforgettable promises. It was a quiet exchange, almost ordinary at the time. Yet that single memory carried a feeling unlike any other. It was the first moment they realized they never had to pretend. Around you, they could simply be themselves. That feeling stayed with them, even when distance, uncertainty, and unanswered questions tried to cover it. Some emotions become quieter with time. This one became clearer. One person in the room finally broke the silence with a gentle question. If you've known this for so long, why didn't you say it sooner? The question lingered in the air. Everyone waited. Even the second party looked up, wanting to hear the answer. The person you love smiled not with confidence, but with honesty. Because I thought time would change what I felt. I believed I would eventually forget. But every path I walked somehow led me back to the same heart. No one interrupted. Those words carried the kind of sincerity that cannot be rehearsed. Something important is waiting for you, because that answer awakened another memory, one the person you love had never shared with anyone. It was about a promise they quietly made to themselves on a night when no one was watching. A promise connected to your name, though they never spoke it aloud. And when that hidden promise is finally revealed, every word spoken in this room will suddenly make perfect sense, opening a chapter that no one saw coming. Not every promise is spoken where others can hear it. Some are made in the quiet, when the world is asleep and only the heart is listening. That was the kind of promise the person you love remembered now. The room remained peaceful, yet their thoughts had already traveled far beyond it. They recalled an evening when they stood completely alone, wondering why every attempt to move forward felt incomplete. It was then they whispered something so softly that no one else could have heard it. If this feeling is real, I won't force myself to replace it. At the time, they believed those words would fade with the passing days. Instead, they became stronger with every sunrise. No one in the room knew that memory except them. Yet as they stood there, it became impossible to keep hidden any longer. Their expression changed not because they had become emotional, but because they had finally stopped resisting what had always been true. Sometimes the greatest change begins the moment a person stops arguing with their own heart. Stay till the end, because this quiet realization opened a door that had remained closed for far too long. The second party noticed that change before anyone else did. They gently wiped away the last trace of tears and offered a small, understanding smile. There was no bitterness left, only a peaceful acceptance that some journeys are meant to teach rather than last forever. In that moment, something remarkable happened. The distance between everyone in the room seemed to disappear. What had started as an uncomfortable silence transformed into mutual respect. Even those who had expected disagreement found themselves quietly reflecting on their own lives. How many times had they mistaken familiarity for connection? How many times had they ignored the quiet voice inside them because it seemed easier? The person you love finally looked up again, and for the first time that evening, there was complete calm in their eyes. They were no longer speaking to convince anyone. They were simply telling the truth. Every time I imagined my future, they said softly, one face always returned, not because I tried to remember it, but because it never truly left. Those words settled over the room like gentle light. No one hurried to respond. Some truths deserve a moment of silence before they are understood. Then, just as it seemed the conversation had reached its ending, someone sitting near the back quietly reached into their pocket. They unfolded a small piece of paper that had been kept hidden the entire evening. Their hands paused for a moment before they spoke. "There's something all of you should see," they said with quiet confidence. Every eye turned toward that folded note. The person you love recognized it immediately, and their expression changed in a way no one expected. It was not surprise. It was recognition. That forgotten note carried words written long before this gathering ever took place, and once those words are read aloud, everyone will finally understand why the sentence, "She was never you," was only the beginning of a much deeper story. An old piece of paper can remain unnoticed for years, yet carry the weight of an entire journey. The room grew even quieter as the folded note was carefully opened. No one leaned forward out of curiosity alone. They leaned forward because they could feel that this was not an ordinary message. The person you love watched every movement without speaking. Their eyes reflected recognition, as though they already knew what those faded lines contained, even before the first word was read aloud. "Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you," and this forgotten note was about to connect every unanswered moment into one unforgettable truth. The voice reading the note was calm and steady. "There will come a day when I stop searching for reasons to ignore what my heart already knows. On that day, I will choose honesty over comfort, even if no one understands." The words were simple, written without decoration, yet they filled the room with a feeling that no one expected. This note had not been written yesterday. It had been written long before anyone imagined this gathering would ever happen. Long before the second party entered the picture. Long before anyone questioned where the person's heart truly belonged. A quiet breath escaped from the person you love. They smiled gently, almost surprised that they had once doubted themselves. "I wrote those words because I was afraid of believing them," they admitted. "I thought time would convince me that I was mistaken. Instead, time quietly proved them right." No one interrupted. Every sentence carried the kind of peace that comes only after someone has stopped running from their own truth. Even the second party lowered their head with quiet respect, understanding that this moment was never about winning or losing. It was about finally allowing honesty to stand where uncertainty had once lived. Then another unexpected detail surfaced. Tucked inside the folded note was something smaller, a tiny photograph that had faded around the edges. As it slipped into view, several people exchanged puzzled glances. It was not a dramatic picture. It captured an ordinary day, an ordinary place, and an ordinary smile. Yet the person you love looked at it as though it contained one of the most meaningful memories they had ever carried. This, they whispered, was the day everything changed, even though I didn't realize it until much later. Something shifted in every heart listening to the story. They began to understand that life is rarely transformed by one extraordinary event. More often, it changes through quiet moments that only reveal their importance with time. Perhaps you have experienced that feeling yourself, a memory that seemed ordinary when it happened, only to become precious after everything else fell into place. Stay till the end, because the story hidden behind that photograph has never been shared before, and once its meaning is revealed, everyone in the room will finally understand why no one else could ever take the place that had quietly been reserved for you from the very beginning. A memory does not become powerful because of where it happened. It becomes powerful because of what it quietly awakened. The photograph rested in the person's hands as though it had been waiting for this exact moment to be seen again. No one rushed them. Every face in the room carried the same silent question. Why had this simple picture been protected for so long? The answer did not come immediately. Instead, the person you love traced the edge of the photograph with their fingertips and smiled in a way that revealed both gratitude and understanding. "This was the first day I felt completely at peace," they said softly. "I just didn't recognize it until much later." Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you, and the meaning behind that peaceful moment was about to become impossible to ignore. The room remained still as they continued. "Everyone remembers the loud memories," they said. "The celebrations, the surprises, the unforgettable conversations. But this..." They gently lifted the photograph. "This was different. Nothing extraordinary happened. We simply shared a quiet moment. No expectations. No pretending. And somehow, that ordinary afternoon stayed with me longer than every grand moment that came after it." Those listening exchanged thoughtful glances. They began to realize that the deepest connections are often built in moments that seem almost invisible while they are happening. The second party listened without interruption. Their expression no longer reflected sadness. Instead, it reflected understanding. They finally recognized that they had been trying to compete with a memory that was never created through comparison. It had grown naturally, patiently, without anyone noticing. With a gentle voice, they spoke for the first time since the note had been read. "Now I understand why your heart never truly changed," they admitted. "It wasn't because someone else failed. It was because your heart had already found where it felt at home." Those words carried no resentment. Only honesty. And somehow, hearing them brought peace to everyone present. The person you love nodded quietly. "I spent so much time believing I needed a dramatic sign," they confessed. "I thought certainty would arrive like a storm. Instead, it arrived like a whisper that never stopped following me." Those words settled over the room with unexpected warmth. Many people lowered their eyes, remembering their own quiet whispers they had ignored simply because they had expected something louder. Stay till the end, because the next moment revealed that someone else in the room had been carrying a secret all along. Just as the conversation seemed complete, an older voice gently broke the silence. "There's something I never told anyone," the speaker said. Every head turned. It was someone who had watched this story unfold from the very beginning, someone who had remained quietly observant while everyone else searched for answers. They reached into a small envelope resting beside them and carefully unfolded another handwritten page. "I kept this because I believed one day it would explain everything." The person you love looked at the page, and for the first time that evening, genuine surprise appeared across their face. Whatever was written there had never been meant for the room to hear, but now, it was finally time, and the first line on that page would reveal a truth that had been waiting patiently through every chapter of this remarkable story. The folded page seemed almost weightless, yet everyone could sense that it carried years of quiet meaning. No one reached for it. No one interrupted. Even the smallest sound in the room faded as the older voice unfolded the paper with gentle care. It was not treated like evidence. It was treated like a memory that had patiently waited for the right season to be understood. "Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you," and the very first sentence on that page changed the atmosphere before the rest was even read. "I wrote this because I noticed something neither of you could see," the letter began. "You both kept looking for certainty in extraordinary moments, while your truest connection kept revealing itself in ordinary ones." A peaceful silence settled over everyone. Those words did not accuse anyone. They simply illuminated what had been hidden in plain sight. The writer continued, "Every time your paths crossed, the room felt lighter. Every conversation ended with more hope than it began. I watched carefully, and I realized that neither of you ever needed to become someone different when you were together." The person you love slowly closed their eyes for a brief moment. It was as though they were replaying countless forgotten memories all at once. Small conversations. Shared laughter that seemed insignificant at the time. Comfortable pauses where no one felt the need to fill the silence. They finally understood why those simple moments had remained unforgettable. They had never been about excitement alone. They had always been about peace. Across the room, the second party quietly smiled through lingering tears. This time, those tears carried no disappointment. They carried understanding. "I spent so long believing I had to become what I thought you wanted," they said softly. "But now I see that the person you were waiting for never needed to become anyone else. They only needed to remain themselves." No one answered immediately because those words held a quiet wisdom that touched every heart in the room. The older voice continued reading. "One day, there will be a conversation that neither of you plans. It will not happen because of perfect timing. It will happen because both of your hearts have finally stopped running from honesty." The person you love looked down, almost as if they already knew which conversation the letter was describing. Their expression was calm, but there was a quiet anticipation in their eyes that had not been there before. Then, just as the final lines of the letter were about to be read, someone near the doorway gently knocked. No one had expected anyone else to arrive. The room turned toward the entrance together. The person standing there did not speak immediately. Instead, they held a small envelope with one familiar name written across the front. The person you love recognized the handwriting instantly, and their quiet smile disappeared into complete astonishment. Whatever was inside that envelope had been written long before this gathering began, and once it was opened, everyone would finally understand why the words, "She was never you," were only the beginning of a truth that had been patiently finding its way home all along. No one expected the next chapter to arrive with such quiet simplicity. The person at the doorway stepped forward without urgency, holding the envelope with both hands as though it deserved more care than conversation. Every eye followed it. The room had already witnessed unexpected honesty, yet somehow everyone sensed that this final message belonged to a story that had started long before anyone realized they were part of it. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you, and the words inside this envelope were never meant to be read until this exact moment. The person you love accepted the envelope carefully. For several seconds, they simply looked at the handwriting. A gentle smile returned, not because they already knew what it said, but because they remembered the person who had written it. "I never thought this would find its way back to me," they whispered. The room remained silent as the seal was slowly opened. Inside was a single handwritten page, folded with remarkable care, as though someone had hoped it would survive both distance and time. The first sentence immediately changed everything. "If you are reading this, it means you finally stopped asking your heart to forget what it was never meant to lose." The words settled over the room like the first light of dawn. No one moved. No one spoke. The letter continued, "I watched you convince yourself that waiting was weakness. But sometimes waiting is simply another name for understanding. The right truth rarely arrives early. It arrives when your heart is finally quiet enough to recognize it." The person you love paused, taking a slow breath before reading the next lines aloud. "You searched for certainty in answers from other people, but every meaningful decision began inside you. Every time you walked away from what felt genuine, life gently guided you back, not to repeat the past, but to recognize what had never truly left." As those words echoed through the room, several people lowered their eyes, remembering moments when they had ignored their own quiet conviction simply because they expected life to speak more loudly. The second party listened with peaceful acceptance. There was no longer any desire to hold on to what had already found its rightful place. Instead, they smiled warmly and said, "Now I understand why those words affected me so deeply. When you said, 'She was never you,' you weren't closing a chapter. You were finally opening the one you had been afraid to begin." The person you love looked at them with genuine gratitude. "Thank you," they replied softly. "Your kindness helped me become honest with myself. I'll always remember that." Just as everyone believed the letter had revealed its final secret, one last folded slip of paper quietly fell from inside the envelope. It was smaller than the others, almost hidden between the pages. The person you love picked it up with curious hands. Only 6 handwritten words appeared across the center. They read the message silently, and for the first time that evening, their eyes filled with joyful disbelief. They looked toward the window, smiled with quiet certainty, and whispered, "So this was the promise all along." No one else had seen those 6 words yet, but when they are finally spoken aloud, every unanswered question from the beginning of this story will come together in a way no one in that room could have imagined.